Will these giants continue to spend on AI? Will it continue to rally big cap tech? We're going to find out a lot next week. So is this a good indication that the tech spend the race is still on?
I think so. I feel that this first month of the year has felt a lot like the first month of last year, except for you remove political overhang and you actually have the rest of the world trying to be more like America. At least Becca's talked to us about Davos because it's fascinating, I think, the impact that Trump's having on the rest of the world. But yeah, I think so. And if you think about Meta, they were the first one really a year ago to get out there and talk about it. It was probably about 18 months ago, but they started to talk about the Capex plans. And they were in the year of efficiency. It was a question of, well, suddenly the stock that was rewarded for cutting back on Capex in the metaverse going to be rewarded. And they absolutely have been. And in fact, they've outperformed the Mag 7 aggressively so far this year. So I like this story. I like the message this week from both the White House and policymakers is we're not even sure who's going to fund this. We've got a few people that have stepped forward to be shepherds of this process, but it was a week where AI and the prospect of spending and again the broadening of that trade. So I think it's very good for infrastructure. I think it's very good for some of the chip players that build the infrastructure. And I think this is a very important announcement. And I think kudos to Meta for getting out there first because I think other folks want to do it as well.
It almost felt like Larry Ellison was up there with SoftBank and announcing Stargate, and Mark Zuckerberg was like, you know what, I'm in it too. $100 billion, here I am. And so this comes, there's a series of announcements here, a cadence at this point. So if there are any doubts about the AI spend and whether or not that would power the rally, I don't know. Has that been put to bed in your view?
I think it's been put to bed. It's always short term. It's always looked through that lens of maybe a month out, maybe 2 months out. But the good news about Capex is that it's deflationary. So you have more productivity, you have more efficiency, so it actually brings down inflation. So if we can get Capex going where we think it's going, inflation should come down as well.
I hear what you're saying. I think there's a time element. I agree with you that if AI and everything related to it can increase productivity, I think that's where you're going.
And efficiencies.
Right. It's
right?
Gonna,
so that
inherently is deflationary.
Yeah.
But in the short term, we're building infrastructure. We're building data centers. We don't have enough workers. We don't have enough materials. I see that as being inflationary. So reflationary, right? Good for growth and pushing up inflation. So
I'll put a button on this. So if you can increase growth,
we're not going to just fight it out all night.
No, because we're both.
He's like, I'm going to have the last word, and then we're going to keep moving on.
Yes.
Is what I heard.
Yes. So if you can increase growth by 3 to 4%, you could actually bring inflation down ultimately by a percentage point as well. So if you can increase growth to where we need to be with all the Capex spending, you could get a percentage point out and actually reduce that percentage point in growth that you got to the upside and inflation to the downside. So ultimately, I think inflation it will be deflationary, but I understand your reinflationary worries.
Yeah, I think it's just timing. And if we're trying to get interest rates down, because Trump declared that will happen, and inflation down.
He knows a lot about interest rates, apparently.
I don't think that's going to I don't think it's going to happen in the short term.
Right.
More than the guy.
Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta, has taken notice of DeepSeek, but not in the way you might have expected. During Meta's most recent fourth quarter earnings call, Zuckerberg expressed a cautious awareness of DeepSeek's novel approaches in artificial intelligence and how its existence might not alter his already strong relationship with NVIDIA and Jensen Huang. So, what implications does this have for NVIDIA's stock? Let's explore that. But first, a big thank you to those of you who've stuck with us this far. Creating these videos takes significant effort and dedication, so if you're enjoying the content, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts on NVIDIA stock in the comments. Your support truly helps us grow. Now, let's get back to the video.
Yeah, well, I'm with you, Rebecca, in terms of order of operations. And I do think that is important, right? It's important in math. I think it's important in economics. And for us to kind of keep in mind how this whole situation functions. Along that same line of thought, I do think that the posturing has kind of shifted to, are these hyperscalers getting too far over their skis in terms of Capex spend? To now I think there's FOMO in terms of, are my competitors going to actually outpace me, outproduce me, outscale me, and reach those efficiencies that Steve was talking about before I do, creating more of a moat for them and a competitive disadvantage for me?
So at what point is that a bad thing for the big cap tech trade? Not for a long, long time.
I don't think so. And particularly not for the chip makers. I know you're going to ask me about NVIDIA. I mean, I think, the concerns that we've had, the stock popped about 7% and then has been kind of trading off a little bit. But I think it kind of reinvigorates that trade, that perhaps some of the concerns about sales growth going forward perhaps are a bit overdone in the short term, at least.
For a name like Meta, we will be able to see those efficiencies, right? We see that
They were the first one?
Exactly, to actually outline this is what we spend, this is what we get back. For a lot of other companies, we have yet to hear that. So, in terms of your point about there is a time element to it, to the investment and then what follows.
Right.
Are we going to hang on to this trade during that period?
I mean, I guess the question is, what else looks attractive and has a catalyst for growth, right? So these companies are, I think most would argue, richly priced, if not outright expensive, and everyone owns them, so that makes them risky to the downside. But if you put your money somewhere else, where else are you going? And we can talk about overseas and is this finally the moment, or small cap, but it feels like a lot of people want to keep a good leg on this stool.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Because long term, it still seems like the right play.
Yeah, I think Stargate might have bolstered the emphasis on what Meta said today. I think if anyone's earned the right to get out there and say it's Meta, and if you think about the ability that they had first over anyone other than NVIDIA to say, hey, we see a benefit here. And again, if anything, the pushback on the Capex spend has not necessarily been around the hyperscalers. It's been around what's the competing factors with some of the biggest players, the hyperscalers, with NVIDIA to develop their own chips. But again, in the short term, I don't even think that's an issue for NVIDIA. I think this is all great for NVIDIA, by the way. It was a week when semiconductors, they had a tough day today, but if you look at the semiconductors trade, semiconductors are doing what they did last year. They're up over 11% year to date. The dynamic around those that are really involved in the infrastructure build out, and it's been Broadcom all over again. But I think this bodes very well for next week. And remember, Meta's out on the 29th, and they will tell you a lot more about this and the profitability.
So then, therefore, this should bode well for the markets overall.
Yeah, I think, the markets are reliant on mega cap tech and Mag 7. So whichever way they go, ultimately the market goes. But to your question, Google has a path for the spend. Amazon has a path for the spend. Apple has a path for the spend. There's only those tertiary names that don't. So you can make a case that they're just fostering, if the market is reliant to the tune of 40%, 30 to 40%, resting on the back of the workhorses, which are mega cap tech, this is good news for the market. This is good news for the tech sector.
So which of the big cap tech companies is your favorite at this point?
I still think it's NVIDIA, particularly after this news. And I think they're squarely, I know they've been knocked down to a third now, but I think that they still are the engine that is leading to this growth. I will, admit that, yes, you worry about the hardware. I do think they've integrated themselves so that there's really, a programmatic build out around that. But at least for the time being, I do think NVIDIA, to me, has...
Mark Zuckerberg correctly acknowledges that DeepSeek is new in a number of ways, and Meta has been doing well, with fourth quarter revenue of $48.39 billion exceeding analyst forecasts. However, the impact of DeepSeek's innovation has caused economists to adjust their lenses as worries loom over market leaders like NVIDIA and the larger tech sector, as evidenced by the sharp decline in the NASDAQ 100. To stay informed about the latest developments from NVIDIA and the ever-changing stock market, consider subscribing to our investing tutorial channel. We provide daily updates on significant market shifts and key catalysts, so hit that subscribe button to ensure you never miss crucial information. We'd love to hear your thoughts on NVIDIA stock, so please share your opinions in the comments below. Now let's dive into today's video.
Yeah, Steph's got a move that I'm going to get to after this because it plays right into what we're talking about here. But how are you assessing the damage here? Morgan Stanley today cuts the price targets of a number of semi stocks, including NVIDIA and Broadcom and Marvell and Micron. NVIDIA goes to 152 from 166, whereas Baird today says they'd be buyers of NVIDIA on this dip.
So 152, just to use that number on NVIDIA, would still be a nice 20% rise from here, which would indicate that you should not sell all your NVIDIA. What you should do, though, is evaluate risk. And I watched the show yesterday. Obviously, I'm here today. We are all talking about risk management. And for the last 2 days, I've been talking to a lot of portfolio managers within Cerity Partners, outside of Cerity Partners. There are very few. In fact, I don't think there's anybody who said that now is the time to back up the truck on AI. By the same token, nobody is saying sell all these names outright. That's not the conversation. The idea that these are bust in some sort of post-1999 way is not what people are talking about. Now, maybe that's wrong, but we'll find out. What people are talking about, and by people, I'm referring to professional portfolio managers, is this. Did we go into the end of last week with simply too much risk? Were we too blasé? Consider Oracle for a second, one of the stocks that's in the headlines the last 2 days. It shot up like a moon rocket last week on Project Stargate.
With an estimated $114 billion to $119 billion in spending for 2025, Meta is placing more emphasis on capital expenditures between $60 billion and $65 billion to support strategic investments in generative AI. This choice is consistent with Zuckerberg's conviction that infrastructure spending will give his company a sustained competitive advantage, and it appears that he won't be altering his strategy anytime soon. Don't forget to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your input helps create a more knowledgeable community where we can all learn and grow together in the world of investing. Stay up to date with the latest market trends, insights, and key updates by subscribing to Investing Tutorial. We're here to help you make smarter investment decisions and stay ahead of the curve.
As you did last week, in their ability to beat and then continue to, if not raise their guidance to the degree they had in the past, because most think that that's not possible anyway, but enough to justify the excitement and the move in those shares?
Well, yes, I do. I mean, we've been doing a lot of research on this, and one of the things to understand is that, training consumes a lot of computing power, but inference, especially at the edge, i.e., when you use you do something on your iPhone that requires any kind of agent AI, any kind of AI function, that inferencing function could be multiples of compute power needed. The interesting result, DeepSeek is run on NVIDIA chips. It's just run on last generation NVIDIA chips versus, say, upcoming generations or highest end. Blackwell is coming from NVIDIA. We think there'll be plenty of people pursuing both ends of the AI spectrum, right? There'll be some still pursuing the absolute high-end cutting edge. Think about internet search. There was Yahoo. Then there was Google. But in between, there were Ask Jeeves, Alta Vista. Bing has been around. That battle to be the ultimate dominant AI model is going to continue for a while still. And at the same time, with the lower cost, a lot of more pragmatic, practical applications can be possible, particularly through software. And
even in the face of the changing AI landscape, Meta continues to be a powerful player with encouraging predictions. Mark Zuckerberg is adamant about his partnership and investment in Nvidia going forward. But what do you think? Will Meta remain the same, or will startups like DeepSeek herald usher in a new era in AI? Finally, if you want to know what Nvidia and other companies have been up to lately, click on the next video on your screen, and I'll see you there.